glass of milk, standing in between extinction in the cold and explosive radiating growth. So the warm blood flows through the large four-chambered heart.
Well, as I was growing up, I really didn't have a firm belief in anything. But I was very compelled to study sciences, like astronomy, geology, biology. Also experienced something that many people laugh at, and it opened my eyes to the world of spiritualism. That there are things that happen, they claim they're unexplainable, but they are explainable. As I grew up, I always said, if there's a God, I want proof.
Okay.
And I got my proof.
Okay. You got your proof.
I got my proof. And what it is not everyone is going to get the proof that they want.
Okay, but what was your experience, I guess?
Well, I had, normally alarm clocks go, they have a certain dee, 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 dee. Well, this alarm clock went dee, 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 dee.
Okay.
And I had visions since I was a child. I've had visions of things.
Wait, that was the miracle? The alarm clock making a different noise?
Do alarm clocks normally make that noise?
You can get them to make 151 different tunes.
Well, not this alarm clock in Germany that came out of Woolworths. Excuse me, I'm not advertising here.
Did it always make that sound, or just one special time?
Just one special time.
And did you record it?
No, I didn't. My mind did, of course, because I'm telling you about it now.
You did say that you studied astronomy.
Yes.
Geology. You know that stuff like that doesn't count as evidence in science, don't you?
Well, because that's the problem with scientists. Not all of them are, but a lot of them are arrogant and seem to.
This is not about arrogance.
Well, yeah, it is, because it's saying that this all occurs by accident. It's too perfect. If you study the
I'm just
atoms,
talking about your alarm clock. Set aside the origin of the universe for a second. Just talking about the alarm clock.
Yes.
Right? It's not arrogance to say, gee, ma'am, your personal report that an alarm clock made a different noise once, and you have no evidence to support it. It's not arrogance to, look at that and go, oh, well, that's not evidence. Because it's an experience that, like I said, not everyone is going to experience what they want. They have to see for themselves. Isn't it how we learn the best? We learn from ourselves. And actually, no. There wouldn't be science if each of us could just learn everything on our own. Of course, science is here to help us better understand how things work. And eventually, you should always get to the point, how did this come here? It's not an accident. Well, let's talk about that question then. What, the complexity of, say, for instance, the atom? Yeah. Atoms are actually not complex. Yes, they are. Have you studied? I have just read a great book from he's a scientist, and he wrote about the atom and this, when you have the core of the atom. But the atom is made of a relatively finite number of elements, right? That's right. Of parts. And don't they propel around the I know that. I know they're weird named things that act weirdly. That's true. So but it's not a lot of moving parts. It is. No, not compared to things made of atoms. Not only of all the atoms, but all the moving parts in all those atoms. How do you explain those moving parts then? Do you think that just came about by accident? Well, how do you explain it? How do I explain it? Yeah. Well, that is how God created it. Okay. And my question for atoms are the building blocks of everything that we have. Is God complex? Yes, more than our little minds could conceive. More than our minds can conceive of atoms, and so he's more complex than atoms, right? Of course. And you just said that the fact that atoms are so complex is evidence that they couldn't have just come into being. Exactly. Right? They had to be created by something. To be so complex. So since God is so much more complex, he also had to be created. No. What created him? Why not? We don't believe... How come all of a sudden God is more complex than atoms, which you say have to have been created because they're so complex, but God doesn't have to be created, even though he's more complex? How does that make sense? Because our mind has to conceive that God is God, and God was here before we all came into being. Why? Maybe the atoms were here before we came into being. I'm sorry? Maybe the atoms were here first.
Well, yeah, that would be up to God. But
No. You're trying to say that because atoms are so complicated, they had to have been created.
Yes.
But if a thing has to have been created, if it's so complicated, then if God is more complicated, it's even more of an argument in favor of him having been created. Well, how come you get to shoehorn God in for free and not explain his origins?
Because
how come?
This is what makes a person a believer, regardless. I don't care what religion.
What makes a person a believer
is called humiliation and submitting oneself to a power greater than us all.
But apparently, ma'am, what enables a person to be a believer is they hold completely irrational, contradictory concepts in their head.
It may be irrational to you because
it's not
thinking.
To me, it has nothing to do with me.
I used to think like you.
You made an argument.
One day
you made an argument. If a thing is so complicated, it had to have been created. Well, it's your argument. How come you get to cheat?
I'm not cheating.
You're cheating.
No,
You're saying this is so complicated it had to have been created. This is more complicated, therefore it's not created?
Well, I understand why.
It makes no sense.
Why do you all have such a problem? Or were there some people in your life that had religious beliefs or foundations and they tried to push them on you and you didn't want to accept them? And you just kept running?
What does that have to do with it? Because how come you're attacking my life?
I'm not attacking you.
Yes, you are. You're saying, ma'am, because I'm having a problem with your irrational argument, that therefore somebody must have hurt me with religion. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
Your argument is silly.
We're here.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. When I discuss people with people, we all have opinions, right?
Okay.
And it's wrong for anybody to trounce on somebody else's opinion.
No, actually it's not. It is not wrong to trounce on opinions that are just silly.
For you, it's silly, but
not for me.
Yes,
there are basic principles of rational thinking, and they say things like, if you make an argument that a thing that is this complicated has to have been created, you can't then cheat and throw out your argument at the next step so that you let your God off the hook.
It's not
cheating. It has nothing to do with my perspective. That's irrational.
Well, you know what I tell everyone?
It's just irrational.
We are all going to die. That's for certainty, right? Regardless what you believe, right?
And that sucks. And?
Why does it suck when we believe, as a believer of any religion, that there is life after death? There is.
If you're wrong,
I'm not wrong.
How do you know? What evidence do you have? What evidence do you have that you're right? How do you know that you're not wrong? The alarm clock doesn't cut it.
Well, my mother also has had. She was clinically dead, and she was resuscitated. And she described...
And medical science is great.
Exactly, that's medical science that did that.
But God gave the doctors the ability to bring... See, that's a miracle.
No, actually what happened is doctors, have been researching how the human body works.
I understand this, but children don't know about this research.
So, I was an English major, and I had to take a science class. And by the way, my knowledge of science to this day goes no further than salt is salty. There, that's it. That's it. That's all I know.
We got Andrew here in Austin.
Hi. Did you read Matthew 5:27 and 28?
Sure, I've read the whole Bible several times.
Okay, do you know what it says there?
Is that the passage about adultery, where doesn't just have to be physical adultery? If you look at another man's wife with lust, you committed adultery in your heart?
Exactly. It says, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart.
Sure.
How do you not think that that's a good thing for people to have limits?
You think that's a good thing?
It's called mind control. You're trying to determine what I think and what I don't think. That's one of the stupidest things I could imagine. How can you control or even pretend to control what somebody thinks? And you don't think Jesus looked on a woman without lust? Or any of his disciples?
That's what Jesus said. That is Jesus, what Jesus said right there.
Well, first of all, we'll set aside how you think you know that this is what Jesus said. Second aside, we'll set aside whether or not it matters whether Jesus said it. I don't care who said it. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And so if somebody says, now I will say, if a man looks on a woman lustfully, he's committed adultery in his heart, is absolutely wrong. Because first of all, he's not necessarily married, and adultery is specifically a lustful or sexual action that extends beyond the bounds of marriage. So as a single person looking on a woman lustfully isn't adultery. And by the way, I put it to you that almost nobody on the planet outside of arranged marriages would have ever gotten married or had sex if they hadn't looked at someone of the opposite sex lustfully. And finally, why is it a man looking at a woman lustfully? Why isn't it a woman looking at a man lustfully, or a man looking at a man, or a woman looking at a woman? This is a misogynist. Hang on.
If you see a beautiful woman, do you just go rape her right away?
Andrew, I'm going to let me finish the thought. It's a misogynistic bit of language that is patently absurd. It denies something that is trivial about human nature and the way things actually work, and tries to compound it as sin. Okay? I could care less if somebody wants to call it sin. Now, go ahead.
Well, don't you think it's important to have limits on your sexual desires? Otherwise, everyone would just be raping everyone.
Really? You think people would just run around raping people?
Well, did you just rape someone?
I haven't raped anybody in the last 50-some years.
Yeah, I've never raped anybody, nor have I had the inclination to.
I've been an atheist for 20 years, so it's just amazing.
So you know that's you do.
How do you get from it's probably a good thing if people don't run around raping each other to therefore this statement about lustful thoughts is necessarily morally correct? Please make the connection between those two. How do you get from we should have some limits to what we can do to we need to have thought crime legislation? How do you get there?
What limits do atheists have?
Well, what culture? Tell me one culture that doesn't have limits. And every culture on the face of the earth has limits, and they're not Christian cultures. Chinese culture has got limits. Japanese, the most secular country in the world is Japan. They have the lowest rape rate. Denmark. Sweden, very unreligious places, and they don't have any rape problem. We have much more rape in the United States
than they
ever do in Denmark or Sweden.
Religion doesn't seem to be any kind of deterrent to rape. Are you implying that all rapists are non-Christians or non-religious? What about the priests who are raping little boys and little girls?
Where do you get your limits from?
I get my limits from a rational consideration of the consequences of my actions. That's how I determine what's moral. I get it from a foundation that says my actions have an effect on those people around me, and theirs have an effect on me. And that if we're going to live cooperatively and share space, we have to recognize that impact. And my freedom to swing my arm ends at their nose. And that I have no right to impose my will over somebody else's will in that type of scenario. That's where I get them from. It's from an understanding.
What's the punishment if you do that then?
I get them
You're just going to die.
Andrew, I get them from an understanding of reality, not an assertion of authority. Now, what was the question?
Well, if you just do all that, let's just say you go out with a gun and you just rape a bunch of people, then you just shoot yourself, what's going to be the punishment for you?
If I go out and rape a bunch of people and shoot myself, what's going to be the punishment for me? I'll be dead.
Yeah.
I'll be dead.
And why?
It's not going to hurt. The bullet's going to go through your head in about a second. There isn't going to be any pain.
That's correct. I'll be dead. Okay, so let's flip the script here. Let's say somebody goes around and rapes and murders somebody, and then after they're done, they get saved. What's the punishment for them?
Oh, the punishment is hell.
No, they got saved.
They got saved.
Are you saying that a rapist can't be saved? See, this is the problem. This is the problem with Christian religion. It establishes unrealistic and irrational and immoral criteria by which to live. And then it creates a loophole so that you don't ever have to be responsible for those actions. Andrew, shut up till I'm done. Christianity is not a moral system. It is an immoral system because it specifically says that there aren't necessarily consequences that you're going to have to pay because of a loophole. And what is the loophole? It has nothing to do with how good you are or how morally you act or anything else. It has to do with whether or not you're willing to be a sycophant to an idea. And if you are, then there is now an exception for which you no longer have to suffer a penalty for this. So the idea that secular morality offers no guarantee that people will ever pay for their crimes and their atrocities is not an argument against secular morality, because that is a tenet of Christianity. It is the foundation. The idea that the Christian God is just is directly contradicted by the idea that the Christian God is merciful. Perfect justice and any mercy are necessarily directly in contradiction, because mercy is a suspension of justice. So do not pretend that your religion is moral and just and then try to attack my position, which is based on reality, because somebody might rape people, shoot themselves ahead, and then not get punished. That's asinine.
If religion is such a bad thing, how come you think, I don't know how many atheists are there in the United States? How come everyone isn't just an atheist then?
Because not everybody is aware of how bad and untrue religion is, which is one of the reasons why
you think you're some kind of genius or something that
actually, yeah, but why is that relevant?
And, everyone else is too dumb to figure it out.
No, it's not a matter of too dumb. You see, I was a Christian for 25 plus years.
Let me ask you a question. Why are you calling in as a Christian? Why didn't you call in as a Muslim, a Buddhist, or a Hindu?
Because my parents raised me as a Christian.
So you didn't have a choice, did you? When did you choose to be a Christian?
Well, it's just a tradition. Your parents teach you whatever religion they do. So if you were born over in Afghanistan, you'd be a Muslim.
Yeah.
So if you were born a Muslim.
So it has nothing to do with truth then. It's just the way you were raised. See, because on this show we actually care about whether or not things are true. And my genius status is completely irrelevant because I was a Christian for 25 plus years. I did not get smarter when I became an atheist. What happened was I gained more information. I became more knowledgeable about subjects. And I decided to actually care whether or not my beliefs were true. You don't seem to care whether or not your beliefs are true. You just like them.
Because you were born here.
Well, I think it's good. I think you're going to have more happiness in your life if you have limits to tell you what you can do, or
how is that relevant to the truth of your religion? I've already said.
It's not all true. I know. I was talking to people on the chat here, and they said, well, they're read the Old Testament. There's all this genocide and stuff, and I was just saying, well, you don't have to read the whole thing, because you just read, for example, what Jesus said.
Okay.
You don't.
So are you saying, I tell you what, we already talked about this earlier, not everything that Jesus said is true or good or smart or wise either. So why would you care at all what any of them have to say? You're not concerned about truth. You've already just said you can pick and choose and toss aside the things you don't like. So you're inventing your own version of Christianity. So why not just chuck it aside and go ahead and invent your own secular moral system? You keep talking about how we don't have limits. I have plenty of limits. And we live in a society that has plenty of limits. As Daryl's already pointed out, most societies have limits. You keep going to this slippery slope thing of, well, if there is no, 10 Commandments or Jesus or whatever, then you've got no limits. You'll just run around raping and killing people. Well, that's already demonstrably false. And there have been multiple studies that actually investigate the correlation between the religiosity of a society and its societal health. And there is always a strong negative correlation. The more atheistic the society, the better they score on societal health factors, from everything from teenage pregnancy rates to STDs to happiness to wealth to murder, rape to healthcare. Now, go out and do some actual research that contradicts this, and then you might have a case for your assertion that I think you'll live a better life if you're. No, you won't. There's no evidence to demonstrate this. This is wishful thinking. Just as not only have you gone and said, well, I'll pick and choose what I want, you've done it in a way where you're just trying to support your own wishful thinking. And until you actually come up with evidence, and until you demonstrate that you care about the truth, we don't really need to waste any more time on it.
And it's to kind of hear you have nobody to answer to, it kind of puts you in position where you can think like, well, I ain't got nobody to answer to it. Like, I can do whatever the hell I want to do.
What makes you think I have nobody to answer?
Whatever comes to my mind, I could just do it.
Yeah, but you see, that's another one. That's more of this kind of cultural misinformation that Matt was talking about before. The idea, part of the way religion makes you dependent upon itself, and that is the job of religion. Religion wants believers who are dependent upon the religion for pretty much everything in their lives. For their sense of personal security, for their sense of what they think might be right and wrong. Religion, it sounds kind of melodramatic and, like conspiracy thinking to say it wants to control you, but, in a simplistic sense, that's kind of how it is. Religion wants you to be dependent on it. Like, if you, say in some relationships where you have a husband and a wife, and the husband's very domineering, and he wants the wife to be totally dependent on him and not have her own life. It's a similar situation to that. So one of the ideas that religion has sort of put out there in this culture is that in terms of right and wrong and what you can and can't do, if there isn't a God, well then maybe that must mean you have no one to answer to, and therefore you have no limitations on your behavior, and you can do whatever you want. And of course that's wrong. For one thing, and we have to live with one another. We have to get along in our society unless we just want total chaos and riots in the streets, right? And so,
but this is what I'm saying. Why would we have to? We have nobody to answer to it. It's like why?
Because we have each other.
Why would I care about your feelings, or why should you care about my feelings? You know what I'm saying?
Well, because we have each other to answer to in a culture, and it's not just about. We are a species that live together. With one. We're not like great white sharks that swim around all by themselves. We actually have to get along with each other because that's the kind of being that we are as people. We're social. And we survive because we form these social contracts with each other. You have friends, you have family, you have coworkers, and then you have the community at large. It all scales up. So we all have to answer to each other. And, if you look at what happens with people who think like what you're suggesting, well, I can just go and do whatever I want. I can go and do bad stuff and it doesn't matter. And what do they find usually happens to them? They get picked up by the cops, get arrested, go to jail. So evidently it does matter.
I mean, but that honestly, if there's nobody to answer to, it's like we won't see nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's all good to do that. It's all good to go rob and steal and do all that, regardless of what the law said.
Yeah, but if the law picks you up and puts you in jail, then you can sit there in your jail cell all day long trying to convince yourself that what you did was fine and good. But if you've had your freedom taken away and then you've had your rights taken away because you're a convicted felon, then, if that doesn't get the message across to you, then I don't really see what will. Most people, it's natural for us to get along. It's a lot of people talk about, well, what could I do, what could I not do, depending on what I believe or what. But really, when you get right down to it, this whole idea that morals simply come from following authority doesn't really work, because if that were the case, if it were simply about, well, this is only right and wrong because there's a God or an ultimate authority that says it's right or wrong, then think about it. If that ultimate authority or God or what have you one day said, well, I declare it to be morally right and for everyone to kill their own children, and so I command you to do this, well, would it be the right thing to do? Would you turn around that day?
In my eyes, of course, it wouldn't. It would never be right to kill a child.
Well, see, there you go. See, there you are.
You don't need a God to determine what's moral, because if your God came to you and said, kill your kids, you'd say, no, that's wrong. Because
I'm saying, honestly, I would think that, I would think it's wrong, but, God wouldn't, I take that back. God would just like he did with the ram and all that stuff in the bush and stuff. But
the thing is,
if he would have come to me personally and tell me something like that, of course, I'd do it hands down.
You do what?
Right,
you wouldn't do it?
I would do it.
You would do it?
Yes, I would.
You would kill your kid if God told you to?
Yes, well, definitely.
Okay, then you're beyond hope. You're an immoral person who doesn't understand that you are your own moral authority. In much the same way that your first instinct was to say, this is wrong and I wouldn't do it, why would you ever worship some God that would tell you to do something like that?
But he hasn't told me to do something like that.
He hasn't told you yet. He hasn't told you yet, David, but you just admitted that if he did, you would do it.
That's thinking in the world sense. That's thinking in the world sense. That's not thinking on the spiritual level. I'm not thinking on the spiritual level.
I don't give a damn about the spiritual.
But if it's in the world sense, and I'm not thinking about God, that God don't exist, of course I'm not going to do it. Because for what? Who are you?
David, I don't give a damn about the spiritual level. I'm talking about...
I know you don't give a damn about the spiritual level because you don't believe in that.
That's correct.
You want to hell with your eyes open.
That's correct. I'm talking about reality. And in reality, it is my view that it is wrong to murder your kid. And in reality, it is your view that it's wrong to murder your kid. And yet what you've just said is if this authority figure that you worship were to tell you to do that, you would do it and think that it was good.
I won't think twice of it. Yes, I would do it.
Well, then you have sacrificed your humanity, your self-respect, your decency, and your moral authority to some being.
We're not here
to
forever,
some
man.
being.
This is only a pit stop. We're not here forever. So if fucking humanity,
you're not anywhere forever.
Shut up, bitch.
All right, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
How can trying to get him to think?
I don't believe you'd actually do that. But the fact that you admitted it and then don't see the problem with it. I mean, how can you possibly think like that? Christopher Hitchens had talked about, and we talked about earlier about, the woman who would perhaps kind of like for some of this to be true. I don't. Yeah. Not for any religion I've heard. I'm not just picking on Christianity. For no religion have I heard that I would wish that it was true. Yeah. That I would never wish that I get to the end of my life and find out that this 70, 80, 90, 100 years, whatever, was some kind of cosmic frickin' joke, and that the real life starts after I die. That's how you form a death cult, which is what most of those religions end up being. Yeah. I would never worship or revere any being that I didn't, I am the ultimate judge of what I consider to be moral and immoral. And any being who perhaps I respect and admire, who comes to me and says, you need to kill your kid. My answer is, you need to go to hell.
Yeah, screw you. Oh, that's this, David, I should point out, this is not the first Christian caller that we have heard from who has said this.
Not even close.
You tried to pin them down on some consistency, on this whole idea that morals have to come from a God. God is an absolute authority figure. Okay, well then what if this absolute authority figure told you to do X that you consider to be morally reprehensible? You would be surprised, but he is not the first guy who has said, well then, yeah, I do it. And that right there, I think, points to the whole problem of this idea of morality coming from authority. I think I can say pretty conclusively, Christianity has no morality. What Christianity has is obedience to authority.
Yeah.
That's really all it's got. And it has that as a substitute for morality. It simply takes for granted that there's this all-powerful being, all-knowledgeable being, who, because he is omniscient and omnipotent, just would never ask us to do anything bad anyway.
Yeah, despite evidence.
Yeah, and because Father knows best, as it were. Hey, so David, we can simply allow him to do our thinking for us.
David, it's
intellectual. I'm sorry, I was just going to say this is indicative of the whole intellectual and moral laziness of Christian fundamentalism. You abdicate morality in favor of just obedience to authority.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I think I would agree with you that David, if he were confronted with that situation, probably would not do what he says that he would do. But he is in this sort of feedback loop of confusion that his religious indoctrination has put him into.
Hey, David, if your God comes and says that it's okay for me to make you my slave, would you do it?
No.
Would you? I mean, it's one thing to say you'd kill your own kid, but would you do that if God said it's okay? Because I'm pretty sure that if you go look at your holy book, you'll find that the God you believe in supposedly said that.
Kind of okay with the whole idea.
But, if you're fine with that, then, you have no moral sense. You're just an automaton following whatever the guy in charge says. Oh, he's the one. He said it's okay. I'm going to go kill. Oh, that's right. I'll be your bitch. Be a man. Be a real human being. Take responsibility for your actions. Take pride in your accomplishments. Understand that, yeah, it's okay to say this is wrong. Absolutely, under no circumstances do I find this acceptable. I don't care if you call yourself a god or not. This is wrong. Mm-hmm. And until you break free of that, until you recognize that it's okay to do that, not only okay, it is essential. It is critical to the progress of humanity that people wake up from these delusions where they have sacrificed everything about themselves in order to walk lockstep with some dick of an authority that doesn't even exist. I mean, this is, oh, somebody said, oh, somebody on high said this, and I'm going to, you know, it's not like you're getting the instructions from anybody real.
And it always falls back on the same question. Well, then if God told you to do X, which you have already said you think is wrong, would you do it? If you say yes, then morality doesn't really matter to you. You're all about obedience to authority. And finally, last word on this, because let's get one more guy in here in the last 7 minutes.
Yeah,
but,
less than 7. But.
You know, every fundamentalist Christian that I've ever talked to says that salvation is by faith and not works. So, you know, why do you even bring up morals at all? Because it really doesn't matter if that's the case. Morals are utterly irrelevant to Christianity and to your salvation if salvation is just by faith and not works anyway. So it's all a lot of hot air, any Christian argument for morality.
Let's go on. We got, is it Kim?
Yes.
How you doing, Kim?
Good, thanks. You know, I want to be respectful to you guys. Even though I'm a Christian, I don't want to put you down, but as
go ahead. I probably just put you down 3 or 4 times.
Well, you know, and I expect that for the most part, but really what I want to ask you is, you just got done talking about authority and, you know, questioning authority, and really, to me, when I listen to you guys, it doesn't seem to me like you're willing to question, because there's a whole world to be discovered and explored within, you know, in my opinion, the Bible. And I certainly did my homework.
Hang on for just a second, because this may or may not change your opinion. Is this the first time you watch the show?
I channel surf and
okay.
I
You may not actually realize that I was a fundamentalist Christian for many years and was studying with the intent to be a preacher when I became an atheist. So it's not like I haven't examined and considered Christianity. It's not like I haven't examined and considered the Bible. Some people, I don't consider myself necessarily an expert, but some people might consider me an expert on the subject. It was and I didn't go looking for a reason not to believe. My pursuit, my study, was to specifically fulfill my obligation, 1 Peter 3:15, where I'm expected to provide an answer, a reason for the hope that I had. It was a way of finding out, were my beliefs actually justifiable? Was I able to give good reason for other people to believe this?
So you're real heavy into reason. I can hear that in the way you speak.
Sure.
You guys are kind of like intellectuals, and so you have to be convinced in your minds, is what I'm hearing.
Right. Where else would you be convinced?
You know, there are those who would say they are convinced within their hearts, within their
My
spirit.
heart does no thinking. It pumps blood.
Well, you know, your heart might just pump blood now that I'm thinking about it.
And your heart does more?
I definitely feel in my human experience something in my chest area that...
You should maybe see a doctor.
...that leaps to the thought of a God. And you know, I want to challenge you. What if you're wrong? What are you doing with your future here?
Pascal's wager. What if I'm wrong?
What if you're wrong? Oh my God, what if you're wrong?
What if you're wrong?
What if you're wrong?
Hey, I got nothing to lose.
Nothing. What if the Buddhists are right? What if the Hindus are right? What if the Muslims are right? What if the Zoroastrians are right?
Well,
you have nothing to lose.
You got to pick which one you want. And
right,
you know,
and I
choose the God that would die for me, not you know, I mean, to me, that's the man right there.
You pick the myth that's most comfortable to you. And what I'm saying is that I don't have any good reason to think that any of them are true, and I'm being intellectually honest and reasonable.
Well, I do believe you're being honest that you don't have faith, and that is a gift that God would give you if you wanted it.
Why would anybody want it? Why would you want to believe things without justification?
There's a myriad of justifications to believe.
Like what?
Like life itself.
Life is proof of life. Life tells you nothing about how it got here until you investigate. And there's no reason to think that there's any kind of... Can you give a reason why there needs to be an intelligent creator?
Because I have no explanation for why I exist without
but just because you don't doesn't mean somebody else could, or that explanations exist.
Well, I don't live based on what other people's experiences are.
Okay, but you are doing that. You're basing it on the Bible.
My experience in exploring the Bible is I have found life.
But it's all through the lens of the Bible. You're looking at everything on what the Bible says. You're looking at it based on a book that's a couple hundred years old.
How do you know that the Bible's God's Word?
I know it because I know it because I know it.
You don't care whether or not it's true. Yeah. You want to believe because you want to believe what you want to believe.
It doesn't matter. I didn't want to believe the Bible. It was the last place I wanted to go. I went everywhere.
I know. I didn't want to be moved by Jesus, but he moved me anyway.
You're kind of a pathetic man that you're such a naysayer to those who have faith.
Yes. Because
that's
faith
pathetic,
is.
Don't you think?
Hang on.
Why do you care if I have faith or not?
Because I actually care about other people.
And what are you trying to do?
Can I answer? Can I answer? Because I'm going to get to a question here in just a second. But I want to answer your question. Faith. If you're trying to determine what is true and what is not true, if you're trying to distinguish between fact and fantasy, faith is not the way to do it. You cannot do it by faith. Faith tells you nothing. Okay, you believe that the Bible is God's Word?
Yes, I do.
Is it in error anywhere?
I don't think so.
You don't?
No.
Do you think that these are instructions from God that represent morality?
I do.
Okay, so if your child was unruly, would you take him to the edge of town and stone him to death?
Old Testament was a time.
No, ma'am.
You don't understand the Scriptures.
Are you kidding me?
I'm kidding you.
All right, listen to this. If you're going to come on here and tell me I don't understand the Scriptures, I'm going to explain to you.
If you're going to bring up Old Testament fundamental ideas that God was using to train up the early experiences in the faith, you don't know what you're talking about.
I beg to differ, and I'll demonstrate that right now. If you'll just be quiet for a second and listen. God in the Bible says that he's unchanging, he's eternal, he's the same now, today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So if something was morally correct in the Old Testament, for example, to stone your unruly children, then it should be morally correct forever. The same is true for slavery, punishing homosexuals, not eating shellfish, etc. When Jesus in the New Testament talks about it, he says that not a jot or tittle of the law will be changed until all has come to pass, despite the fact that he personally goes on to violate a number of Old Testament laws. Number 3, please be quiet, let me finish, is the idea that I'm sure you believe that the 10 Commandments are binding. Do you not?
I do.
Well, okay, that's in the Old Testament. You should look it up. You cannot pick and choose from the Old Testament to say what you want to keep and what you want to throw away.
Are you going to let me respond now to all this that you just spewed out at me?
Yes.
Number 1, the Old Testament harshness reflects God's rage with sin.
So your God isn't benevolent.
He cannot tolerate the wickedness of mankind. He cannot tolerate it.
So why does he tolerate it now?
His love.
Why does he tolerate it now?
Why aren't you letting me talk like I let you talk?
Well, okay, go ahead.
In his love, he sent someone to offer a way out of this terrible trap that we're all in. Do you not think you're a sinner? Don't answer me because that'll get you started talking. Bottom line, you don't understand grace. You don't understand what's been done for you with God himself sacrificing himself.
Yeah, I do, actually. And I put you on hold. I didn't hang up.